What's going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day as I adjust my microphone here. Yeah, hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day wherever you're at and whenever you're watching this. We're finally getting back into the continuing red tape. It's been a couple months. The last few months have been kind of hectic. I haven't really had an extended amount of time to sit down and do some of these longer videos as these red tape videos are. But I got a little bit of time here and I definitely want to continue. I think there's 6 episodes, including this one, left to get into here for Black Adytum. We're getting into Sarcic stuff. I believe when last we left off on Dragon Ball Z, the Foundation was working with the Davites and learning a bunch of stuff from them and their side of everything that happened in, the Great Ancient War between these 3 factions. And the submersible Foundation base came under attack from the Mechanites, and I don't remember their names, off the top of my head. I'm bad with names. If you've been around the channel for a while, you'll know that. But one of the main characters ended up having to essentially sacrifice himself and become like the new avatar for the Scarlet King, and used his powers to scatter the Mechanites and essentially get them to flee. So the Foundation has I guess loose alliance with the Davites now, working and learning with them, and the Davites now have a connection with humanity again, back on the material realm, and so they're not just stuck in their ethereal plane. So yeah, that's pretty much the small short of it from what I remember when we left off. So looking forward to getting into seeing the Sarcic or Nalkin side of things. I think it was the Nalkins, right? Something like that, as they're called in this story universe, whatever. I assume we're going to get into, obviously, their revolt from the Davites and how they freed themselves. I'm curious if Yaldabaoth is going to be a part of this, or if it's going to be, again, I forget the other kind of deity that the Sarcics have. There's like the Yaldabaoth, who are like the old Orthodox ones, and then like the Neo-Sarcics have a newer deity that they kind of worship, that I think like became a god and destroyed Yaldabaoth or something like that. I don't remember, again, off the top of my head. So I guess it also depends on what canon universe you're talking about. So, but anyway, looking forward to getting into the final chapters here of Red Tape. So with all that said and done, let's just jump into it here. And yeah, continue on here with the Exploring series version of the Red Tape. Links will be down below in the description, as always, to the original video without my commentary and reaction, into the Exploring series channel. So please do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video of his without my commentary and reaction, be sure to go over to his channel, hit that like and sub button, and yeah, show the man some support. Let's do it. If the monitor will turn on here for me. There we go. Volume's good. Let's do it.
SCP-001 Black Adytum Part 1. Mussolini once said in a speech that it is blood which moves the wheels of history, and while there certainly is some room for an argument there, there's little doubt that history is indeed filled with blood. While that's quite true for our real-world history, it's even more so true for the history of the Red Tape series, which has taken extensive looks at the ancient civilizations of the Deva and the Mechanites. In the articles covering the great cities of Amani Ram and Mamjul and Karar, we saw the Foundation get involved, deeply so in the case of some individuals, with the histories of these civilizations, which continue to be increasingly relevant in the present day. Now it's the time for the Nalka, also known as the Sarcites, whose dark past involves plenty of conflicts with both the Deva and the Mechanites.
It's also interesting too that like the factions essentially had been, all 3 factions essentially had kind of been wiped out and wiped from history, right? Like there were only kind of like small references from them, and through the Foundation's meddling and getting into this stuff, they're essentially revitalizing the factions and their war in present time, right? The Mechanites, their city of a monoram had teleported into, a pocket dimension and had been lost to history. The Davites were cut off of the material plane and were stuck in the ethereal plane and were kind of dying off. I would assume we're going to learn what happened with the Sarcic / Nalkins here during this part, but through the Foundation's meddling, they have essentially revitalized these factions and their war in the present time. So, good job.
They do, of course, continue to exist in some form in the current day, and as usual, history has a tendency to bleed into the present.
Repeat itself.
Let's take a look. The document begins with a message exchange between an artificial intelligence construct named Xenophen and an unnamed individual. Xenophen states that it is confused, as this is unfamiliar, but the individual tells it to settle down and tell them what it knows about itself. Xenophen writes that it is a Gen 9 AIC developed aboard Ryza Site-7 in a classified location in the North Atlantic. Its current uptime is 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
Interesting.
It asks how it knows that, before answering itself by writing that it's because it's designed to know things, so that's a stupid question. The individual tells it to not worry about it, and to take its time to see what it still has access to. Xenophen replies that it is pre-programmed with level 5 Triad clearance, giving it access to 7,235 documents, transcripts, and files across the SCP database. It comments on the individual's implication that it has been activated before, as it has no records of previous uptime.
Interesting.
The individual replies that that isn't great, as it seems that the hard reboot might have involved the Ryza techs messing with its memory banks.
It's giving me admonition vibes here.
They tell it that it was a Gen 9 AIC specifically commissioned and developed to serve as the lead investigator on a Foundation research initiative, a project that they couldn't trust a human with. Not again. It was designed to be an impartial, unshakable observer and cataloger of information without the quibbles and follies that they had.
That's interesting, right? So, they want this AI to research something because the AI would have an unbiased opinion, but then, wouldn't that then be a situation where no matter what data it collected, as soon as it hit human eyes, humans would have their own biases? So, what's the point of even researching this then and having AI do this, right? I don't know.
Xenophen then asks what the project was, leading us into Chapter 1, the Archive of Nadok. It starts with the fifth truth of Adytum, which states, "The slave's soul cannot be free so long as his body is chained. True liberation is the liberation of the flesh, and the slave's flesh can only be liberated when the blood of the master is spilled."
I hadn't thought about that, right? Is there some kind of, through whatever Davite ritual and magic, they use, is the body and soul of the person, then bound to the master of the ritual? And so even if they were to revolt and free themselves, if they died or something like that, would their soul essence still go to the Davite that, was their master, kind of a situation? So in order to free themselves, they actually have to kill the Davite that initiated the ritual that bound them. I hadn't really thought about that.
With that, we're given the file for SCP-001 itself, the mythical city of Black Adytum, the capital of the Nalka that stretched across Central and Eastern Asia in the 3rd millennium BCE. The city was described by contemporary sources as an ancient metropolis, a dead city, a city of the dead, a mausoleum, a tomb nation, a failed experiment, a monument to atrocity, and various other descriptors.
So yeah, that's right. The Sarcic slash Nulkins in this universe are like necromancers, right? Huh. I guess that would kind of make sense. Like if their soul is bound in some way, that the only way to free it potentially would be to die and then have the soul reincarnate in the body when that's dead. So undeath. Okay.
As of writing, the current prevailing belief among Parahistory Division experts is the Hussein hypothesis, that Black Adytum never existed. For historical context, the 6 Aegean tablets recovered from the Sea of Crete were the first discovered mentions of Bronze Age advanced human civilizations, and led to the discovery of both Amani-Ram and Mamjul and Karar.
Right.
The full set of tablets were finally fully translated in 2020, and they deal with 6 separate subjects: the existence of a forgotten world ruled by 3 massive, technologically and magically advanced empires, the origins of the Davic Covenant, the origins of the Nalka, the origins of the Cult of the Broken God and the Mechanite Empire, details of the apocalyptic war between the 3, and theories on the origin of the 3-prong army that swept across Asia, annihilating the aforementioned cultures.
The abomination, and the
The
abominant,
6th
whatever.
tablet, which discussed the 3-prong army, was damaged before it came into Foundation custody, leaving it partially unreadable. We're
Convenient.
provided the Parahistories Division's translation of the 3rd tablet, which reads: Root, blood, steel. Blood spilling from the gaping wounds of Yaldabaoth as he lies sundered and weeping on the coast of the sea. Run through and maimed by its brethren, cast down to earth just as they were cast down to earth by him. Hot tears of pain, of betrayal, filling the once dry canyon.
It's interesting, that little quote that it said there. Cast down to earth like they were cast down to earth by him. I want to listen to that again.
As he lies sundered and weeping on the coast of the sea. Run through and maimed by its brethren, cast down to earth just as they were cast down to earth by him.
That's an interesting quote, right? That implies that at one point in time, that Yaldabaoth and probably these other 3 originally were somewhere else, in some other dimension universe, maybe some kind of city of the gods or something like that, right? And they were cast down here to Earth. And then their war began with them. Maybe they started fighting in some other kind of city of the gods or dimension of the gods, and whoever he is cast them out because they were tired of dealing with it, and then their war just continued down here on Earth until eventually the 3 of them, you know, wounded each other to the point where they couldn't recover. And then since they have infected humanity essentially with their war, and it's continued through humanity now with 3 factions. Interesting.
Hot tears of pain, of betrayal, filling the once dry canyon, turning it into an open bay as he dies a god's death. Blood spilt onto the boards of the great grand ships as the cruel slave masters flay the skin off the backs of their stock. Moans of pain from the flock without a shepherd as they row forward, begging for deliverance from agony. The fleet landing on the sandy shores of their new territory, slaves being led off the arks in chains to lay the foundations of their master's kingdom. Blood dripping from the brow of a nameless slave as he marches with 5 others, dragging huge blocks of stone to the new kingdom's first creation, Adytum, a temple, vast and grand, nestled safely into the ground as an offering to their Lord Scarlet. endless corridors in this underground labyrinth, meant to hold the bodies of the hundred slaves sacrificed for this construction. Blood leaking as he stumbles, foot catching over a sharp bone protruding from the silt and soil. He and his slave brethren kneel, digging out the clay for 2 days and 2 nights, until the whole of Yaldabaoth's form lies exposed, weeping and bleeding and dying.
Feels very bloodborne.
Flesh and bone knitted into a mass, meat thrumming with dominance, with superiority, with power. Blood gushing as he kneels, shearing into the meat with a crude knife of bone, taking the sacred flesh into his mouth, chewing and swallowing,
Jesus.
eating his god, becoming divine. Blood flooding the gutters of the nameless city as the slaves rise up with him, overthrowing their yokes and slaughtering their erstwhile masters. Blood pooling as his followers take the ritual, taking a piece of the divine into them, as Yaldabaoth bleeds and weeps, cursing the name the slave has chosen. Ayun of the Nalka, Witch King of Black Adytum. As discovered by doctors Robert Aram and Hedvig Nussbaum, large parts of Mechanite dogma were predicated on a deep-seated cultural hatred for the Nalka,
what's up, Couchman? How you doing, brother?
stemming mainly from their liberal usage of carnomancy, or flesh magic, which were in direct opposition to the cult of the broken gods' transhumanist beliefs. This religious divergence was one of the chief causes for the first occult war that erupted in Asia in the 2nd millennium BC between the Broken Empire, the Davic Covenant, and the Nalka. This war of attrition would result in a catastrophic decline of all 3 cultures before their eventual toppling by the Three-Prong Army, which are likely to be the historical Sea Peoples, and were led by the Black Star. As related by the Rajmata of the Davic city of Karar, the Nalka culture group has roots in the Deva of Mamjul and Karar. As part of the Davic initiative to settle the rest of Asia, a colonial group of several thousand Deva and their slaves were dispatched to the land surrounding the Yellow Sea. The impossibility of communication meant that after years of no word from the new colony, it was assumed by the Deva that the colony had failed, and it was only several centuries later that they encountered the Nalka. It was even later that the possible connection between the Nalka and the failed colony was considered. Until the translation of the 3rd tablet, the sole point of evidence for the Deva claim of inheritance was the Rajmata herself, as prior to her death, she insisted that she later recognized one of the slaves in the colonial group as the man who would eventually become Witch King Ayun. The Hussein hypothesis was formulated to provide a possible answer for why the Foundation had been unable to locate Black Adytum, despite a 3-decade-long search.
Yeah, I mean, you'd also think something that sounds as large as that would be kind of easy to find, right? But I guess who knows how buried it is or how thoroughly it was destroyed. Plus, I mean, there's magic involved. Who knows, right? Like, I mean, Amon Aram was teleported to another dimension. Who says they couldn't do something similar with magic?
It was first publicly submitted to the Foundation Academic Service in 2032 by then Deputy Director Youssef Hussein. The abstract of the hypothesis reads, "For 3 decades, parahistorians and archaeologists have dedicated their efforts towards locating the legendary capital city-state of the Nalka culture group, Black Adytum. Initiated by the Foundation in the early 2000s, the search has expanded throughout Central East Asia and has yielded findings suggesting Nalkan settlements in China, Mongolia, and Siberia, with concrete geographical and temporal links to the Xia and Shang dynasties of Imperial China. Of particular interest, there have been discoveries at Shang archaeological sites of several mummified corpses and bone carvings which bear the hallmarks of Nalkan culture and religion."
I wonder if, like, the terracotta soldiers are going to somehow like have some kind of connection with this, right?
However, in this paper, I will contend that the evidence suggests that the Nalka were a confederation of several autonomous, nomadic tribes without a central capital or leadership throughout most of their history.
Interesting.
Archaeological evidence also supports a tribal unification in a defensive effort against the Black Star entity, before eventual assimilation into Shang culture as a religious minority. It is therefore reasonable to suggest that Black Adytum never existed as an imperial capital as previously assumed, but perhaps instead an abstract concept of unification or some lost cultural ideal. The Hussein hypothesis was initially controversial, but over the following decade, a continued lack of return on the Black Adytum initiative and further archaeological evidence of a disseminated Nalkan society made it increasingly appealing.
So they're trying to say that they were essentially like a large nomadic culture, and that essentially wherever they were, Black Adytum existed, or at least wherever they would gather in a certain number, that would come Black Adytum, right? And I would assume that maybe when they gather, they would perform some kind of rituals or something like that.
Following Hussein's promotion to director of the Parahistory Division, it became the de facto accepted theory across the Foundation. On August 25th, 2041, the O5 Council met with Hussein for the scheduled annual update regarding the progress of the Black Adytum Initiative, communicating through the lay space. O51 asks him if he has anything new for them, which Hussein sarcastically responds to by asking what he thinks. 054 tells him not to be sassy, so Hussein apologizes, saying that no, aerial search and archaeological research over the past year have failed to meaningfully indicate the presence of a large Nalkan capital in the search area. As he said, he's growing increasingly sure that continuing to search for it is a waste of their limited resources. The continued failure of the Black Adytum Initiative is, to him, further argument to shift the resources they've been wasting to the much more compelling avenue of research they have right in front of them, Project Locust. As of now, it's the only real research avenue they currently have for Forerunner Triad, as Locust has already returned archaeological results, while the Black Adytum Initiative hasn't. He simply
sounds familiar, right? Like that seems to be kind of be the theme with each of these cultures. Like someone is doing research into these cultures, they're getting nowhere. The Foundation is threatening to pull funding to other projects and or places that could use it, and then huzzah, a miracle happens and they have some kind of breakthrough. That seems to be the case so far with the Mechanites, with the Monoram, and then also with the Davites.
Doesn't see why they should continue pouring money into a pit that hasn't given them anything back in 40 years. This causes some murmurs among the council members, and 052 asks who is in charge of the Black Adytum Initiative. Hussein replies that he is, since 2024. 052 remarks that he read his paper on the Hussein hypothesis, and although he's not much of a historian, he found it interesting, and he's inclined to agree with some parts of it. He reads an excerpt of it, which discusses how the Foundation has chosen to exercise the same search model that helped them to discover Mamjul and Karar, without acknowledging the sheer happenstance associated with Dr. Galanis' discovery of Mamjul, nor the obvious differences between the Davic Covenant and Nalkan cultures. He asks Hussein what kinds of search practices they exercise, and he replies that they follow an extensive pattern of satellite-identified archaeological sites of interest that are then investigated by a ground team to determine any likely connections or archaeological information they don't already know. 052 then reads from the Jade file, which had them focusing search efforts near established archaeological sites, and it says that it doesn't seem that their search model has really altered that much since Dr. Galanis disappeared. After a moment of silence, Hussein asks what he would suggest, and 052 replies that the initiative relies excessively on archaeological evidence, but hasn't really made use of a human element. There are a number of native ethnic groups in the region of central China that they've been searching, but it doesn't seem like they've made much of an effort to tap them for information. Hussein explains that they are extremely reticent to speak with the Foundation, thinking of them as foreign scientists, and even the non-anomalous groups already face constant pressure and persecution from the state. 052 says that he understands that, but it still seems like a potential well of knowledge that they decided to skip over because it was too hard. Hussein asks what group he's referring to specifically, and after looking through a folder, 052 mentions a group known as the Sarcic. Hussein replies that the name is familiar, as they're a small ethno-religious minority occupying ancestral lands in the borderlands between China and Mongolia. They possess some anomalous capabilities, but nothing that's stuck out to warrant significant study, and he refers—
I mean, still though, right? Like, that to me would sound like people that are trying to hide, you know? I don't know.
to them as being a bit backwards, preferring to retain their tribal structure with minimal outside interference. They're also a dwindling population, with maybe only 100 or 150 left alive. His predecessor interviewed them as part of a survey of local mythologies, or attempted to interview them at least, with a conversation lasting 2 minutes and ending with the tip of a spear. Since then, they've sent an emissary to their lands every few years to try and speak with them, exchanging a few words before sending them on their way without anything of substance. The Foundation has stepped in to prevent them from being integrated by the Chinese for the sake of keeping track of members of an anomalous population, but that's the extent of meaningful interactions. They simply do not want to talk to outsiders, and that's how it goes with the locals. Either they're unwilling to speak to anyone, or they're of no help. 052, however, replies that he doesn't have any reason to believe they're unwilling to speak to anyone, just people. The Artificial Intelligence Applications Division has recently hit a number of benchmarks on a new Gen 9 AIC called Xenophen. It's a massive improvement over the last generation, capable of complex—
They're trying to suggest that they would talk to an AI over people. I feel like that would be even more of a turnoff to them, right? Like, especially if, you know, they are descendants from the Nalkins, and they would probably have stories passed down to them of the Mechanites with their technology. So anyone coming at them with an AI, right? Like, I feel like that ain't gonna get you anywhere.
Analysis and deep thought, high levels of understanding through abstraction, ability to critically investigate different conversational threads with a human opponent, and fine motor control of a mechanical shell even. It's difficult to say if it's sentient, but it is capable of independent thought, and is the most lifelike construct they've ever had. The plan for the Gen 9s was always to see if they could perform the job of analytical researchers, assisting them and eventually replacing them in the field. 052 feels that this is a perfect test case, but the rest are a bit incredulous. It
is also interesting that an O5 council member is kind of like pushing this researcher specifically towards Sarcics and this way. I don't know. Kind of makes you feel like the O5 council have a little bit more of an agenda and they know more that's going on and they're trying to, you know, push something. But
Hussein wondering why these locals would speak to a robot over other people.
Right. It's just what I was saying.
052 replies that they're already not talking to them, so there's no harm in trying it. Hussein counters that it could possibly earn their ire and shake a beehive that there's no reason to shake. If they grow angry enough at them, who knows what they're capable of. 052 replies that it's simply one interview, and if it works, they have a new lead. Otherwise, they'll know that this route is barren and they can refocus the brunt of their financial resources onto Locust. The Council puts it to a vote, with it coming down to 051 as the tiebreaker. He's not fond of the idea of outsourcing this to the constructs, but 2 counters that they've downsized their personnel by almost half in the last 2 decades, and constructs do half of the work just to keep this site running. 1 says that those are simple ones, and asks if this one has a personality. 2 hesitantly replies that he supposes it might have tendencies that could be interpreted as a personality. 051 sighs and raises his hand, allowing it 1 interview, and he would like to be present when they turn this thing on. Hussein asks what happens when this inevitably fails, and 1 replies that they'll just throw the weight behind Locust instead. The individual messaging Xenophen asks what Project Locust is, as that's new to them, but Xenophen has no idea, despite having access to all the Triad files. Either it has been deliberately shielded from it, or it doesn't exist. It doesn't like not knowing something, so the individual just tells it to keep going through it. On November 2nd, 2041, 051 flew to a protected site 40 kilometers off the coast of Alaska in order to attend the initial activation of Xenophen. Flanked by a detachment of MTF Alpha 1 guards, he arrives to the half-dozen oil rigs that make up the facility, coated in a thick layer of snowfall. He's greeted by 052 and Secretary Katseros, who welcome him to the home of RISA, the Foundation's record-keeping and information security administration.
Definitely feels like 052 has some other kind of agenda here.
051 doesn't care much for the weather here, and the 3 proceed quickly inside.
I mean, yeah.
They proceed past the massive AI farm in the center of the building, in which a dodecahedron floats slowly on top of a magnetic platform, surrounded by a labyrinth of server racks.
Can't help but think about, the beacon in Critical Role.
051 comments on how he was alive when the transistor was invented, and insisted that computers were a fad for the longest time. 052 smiles and says that in 2023, the AI-AD began rolling out the first slate of Gen 3 AICs from the AI farm here, the first general-purpose AICs capable of complex natural language processing and diffused image recognition. They were smart, but limited compared to what they're tooling with now, and if Maria Jones had lived for another year, she would have seen them go from kilobytes of RAM to true artificial intelligence. They enter into a small observation room, where they're greeted by a Dr. McKay, RISA technical sub-director. She asks if they can begin since they're all here, since she has a lot of work to do, and 051 comments that he would have thought she'd be more excited to turn on what he's been told is the latest and greatest AIC. She replies that she's not AI-AD, and technically she outranks everyone in the division. Machine learning isn't really her passion, and she's turned on the latest and greatest AIC 4 times in her career already, so it loses the mystique fast. The O5s look through the observation window to see a skeletonized carbon and titanium humanoid body inside the testing chamber.
They're literally making a Terminator. Okay. They're giving Skynet a body and they're gonna let it out in the wild. I'm sure nothing could go wrong. They could, they clearly have not watched Terminator movies. They have not watched The Matrix. This is fine.
Standing limply. A cable snakes from under its jaw to the ceiling, and its face is 2 plates with a single illuminated camera lens in the center. McKay explains that Xenophen is their first
McKay, I wonder if that's a Stargate reference.
9th generation artificial intelligence construct, constructed from the Red Mind model first brought online in 2039. It represents the aggregate of 20 years of research and development in machine learning, data science, and paratechnology, both at the Foundation and in the mundane world. While the Red Mind model is generally intended for research assistance, Xenophen has been trained specifically to assist with para-history-related queries and projects. It has read access to a large portion of the SCP database and is capable of interpreting and internalizing new data to varying levels of biases. Crucially, it also has the ability to analyze new data in reference to old data and vice versa, an ability that they have previously been unable to effectively replicate in an AIC.
And learn from the past.
051 asks why it has a body, as he thought that AICs were just computer programs. McKay explains that with the addition of fine motor control and mobility skills, adapted from the Thor program, Xenophen is also capable of having an instance controlling a physical shell, making it their first android, incidentally. McKay brings Xenophen online, causing it to begin to shudder violently as it calibrates the servo motors. It then stops, before turning to face the glass, and speaks in a soft, synthesized voice. It greets each of the individuals by name, causing 051 to raise an eyebrow. It explains that it has provisional read access to all the files associated with the Parahistory Division, including their personnel files, so it cross-referenced their faces with the personnel file photos. McKay asks it how long that operation took it, to which it responds with 1.6 seconds. She's impressed that it was able to trawl the entire personnel file database to perform an image analysis on every headshot, and do it 4 times in less than 2 seconds. 052 asks if it can identify itself for him, causing it to turn towards a nearby mirror and stare for several seconds. It states that it is Xenophen AIC, an artificial intelligence construct developed by AIAD as a fork of the Red Mind model specifically for historical analysis and research. It is capable of complex reasoning, independent.
This feels like this is going to end up becoming a new version of Meccan or something like that, right? Like, I feel like somehow this is where that's going. And they're going to end up, because like the Scarlet King, the Avatar anyway, the Scarlet King is now back. So, like, are they gonna somehow bring avatars of the other gods back? Right? You got. I feel like that's where this is gonna end up going.
Analysis and operation, interpretation of natural language instruction, and alteration of training data. 051 interrupts to ask it if it can lie, and it replies that it cannot. It has been programmed with shackling, specifically preventing it from knowingly obscuring information or presenting falsehoods.
Yeah, but knowing that, it would probably, I mean, like, who says it can't grow to a point where it could break those shackles, bend some of its programming, etc.?
051 then asks where its ultimate loyalties lie, and it says with the operating authority of the Foundation. He then asks if it's sapient, but Xenophen says that sapience is a uniquely human trait, and it does not believe it possesses it. 1 motions to McKay to cut the mic, and turns to 2, asking if it's telling the truth. 2 replies that AICs have never been conscious, as they're constructs of an artificial intelligence mind model, subject to strict limitations in their ability to self-modify their programming. It can think, but it's not any more conscious than a lab rat is. 1 then asks him why he's doing this, as he's smart enough to figure out 100 other ways to get in touch with the Sarcic. So why this?
This
2 replies
strange.
that it's because it's a machine. If the Sarcic can point them in the direction of the Nalka and Black Adytum, then there's no one less in a position to be swayed by an ideology about flesh and the power of carnomancy than an AIC. This is the problem that they had with both Aram and Galanis, as they were both perfectly positioned to be sympathetic to the objects of their study. Xenophen won't go native, because it can't. They'll never accept it.
Yeah, but again, like, the opposite could also easily happen, because again, if these are descendants of, people who fought against ancient super advanced technology and machines and whatnot, like, how are they going to feel seeing something that could represent that,
The two look back at Xenophen again, staring back at them impassively, and one says that it's his responsibility if this all goes sideways.
Yeah.
Two replies that he wouldn't have it any other way, and they reactivate the mic. He asks Xenophen what it can tell them about the Sarcic tribe in northern China. A whirring sound is heard before Xenophen replies that Group of Interest 494 is a small, isolationist, ethno-religious minority with Vlam-class anomalous capabilities, centering around practices of their Gnostic religion. They are extremely hostile to outsider influence and interference, and external analysis indicates that they follow a highly egalitarian tribal structure, informally guided by a single religious leader. Two asks if it thinks it would be capable of interviewing a member of the tribe, and Xenophen replies that that would be within the realm of its abilities. It does, however, caution that the Sarcic tribe has, in the past, displayed an active aversion to modern technology, which would include itself.
Yep.
Discussions are unlikely to be successful or productive. Two says that he knows, but he wants it to do it anyway. Xenophen stares ahead for a moment before stating that it understands. Before we get to that initial encounter, we're given a short briefing on the Foundation's information about the Sarcic tribal territory. The Sarcic tribe has been known to the Foundation since 1841, when British expeditions into China during the Century of Humiliation referenced the group as one of many encountered native tribes. They did not note any paranormal or supernatural capabilities, and the Sarcic are a relatively minor footnote in the record. The records do note that the chieftain was a young woman, who they met with only briefly, but the Sarcic appear only a handful of times in the historical record following that. One appearance is in noted explorer and gentleman Lord Blackwood's journals,
Blackwood, the
recording
man, the
a
myth, the
meeting
legend.
with Blackwood as part of his survey of mystical savages in the region. Blackwood attested that the Sarcic had some natural affinity for black magic, which is now an out-of-date and backwards understanding of magic, but was fairly widespread at the time, encompassing a wide swath of religious beliefs and anomalies. He does not offer details in his writings, which focus more on a fascination with the culinary practices of the Sarcic. But
I'm honestly surprised there haven't been more Blackwood tales or other characters similarly. I feel like that's kind of a good way of like telling certain SCP stories, especially like historical ones, through the lens of like an adventurer recording, their adventures and the things that they've discovered.
he does write of a unique capacity for shared genetic memory, with members of the tribe remembering some events from the same point of view, including events that they were not alive for.
Interesting.
The exact mechanism through which this is accomplished is unclear. He also recorded that the Sarcic population exhibited a frequency of deformities and birth defects much higher than normal. He ascribed this to the...
I would assume that would probably have something to do either with incest or their cannibalistic rituals.
tribe's aggressive isolationism and depleting numbers, as they numbered only 300 to 400 at the time, resulting in significant inbreeding and a depleting gene pool. He did not perform population studies or ethnography to confirm this, and quickly earned the ire of the population for his insistence on it. His party was removed shortly thereafter, and the Sarcic have remained cold towards re-establishing relations with outsiders. The Sarcic were grouped with several other ethnic groups studied by Welp under the Macklin Agreement in 1921, in which the Foundation assumed custody over them with the understanding that containment would be upheld. In return, the Republic of China ceded the rural land the tribes occupied. The Macklin Agreement's signing relied on the weakness of the Chinese state at the time, and has since repeatedly been a point of contention with the People's Republic of China as the legal inheritor of the agreement.
Interesting.
The Sarcic tribes now occupy a sovereign, Foundation-administered parcel of land in Inner Mongolia, and largely refuse all contact with outsiders. They are believed to have a complex religious faith, and the current Foundation contact with the tribe is the Carcist Halina Yeva, a religious leader. In accordance with 052's orders, Xenophen was securely transported to Staging Site 78 in Sichuan, China on November 20th, 2041.
Home in the Szechuan sauce.
From there, a group of 16, consisting of Xenophen, Liaison Tai Zhang from the Diplomatic Corps, and members of MTF Pi 9 set out on a day-long trip north to the Sarcic tribal territory. Upon arrival, Zhang talks to the guards, and then tells Xenophen that it took quite a lot of convincing, but they agreed to let it go in there. He thinks that they're more curious than anything, but there are a couple of ground rules for interacting with these Sarcic people. He's spent the last 4.5 years cultivating what could be generously called a relationship with them, making more progress than anyone has before him, and they still won't interact with him for more than a few minutes at a time. Before Xenophen does something to alienate them and ruin all that, there's a quick list of things it shouldn't do.
Interesting. So it sounds like they might not even really like trade with anyone else either. They sound very self-sufficient and isolationists.
It shouldn't cut them off while they're speaking, question their traditions, clothing, or architecture, ask them what a certain word means, try to force gifts onto them, or ask for anything they haven't offered already. Also, for the love of God, don't ignore anything they say. Xenophen replies that it is wired into the SCP database, which contains all of this info on a report that Zhang filed with Central Asia Regional Command a year and 3 months ago. Zhang says that he forgot that it can do that, as most AICs he interacts with are just bots on the server, but Xenophen replies that it is not most AICs. Zhang still tells it to just follow his lead and not to do anything dumb.
Mr. Fancy Pants.
If they get kicked out, it can at least say that it tried. The two step out of the trailer, and Xenophen sees the 3 Foundation heavy land transporters parked outside of the Sarcic encampment, made up of several dozen large hide and skin tents surrounded by a chain-link fence. The two approach the camp, where they are quickly met by 2 middle-aged men with weathered brown skin and tied-back hair, wearing clothing made from animal hides. Both carry a saw-like blade, and one has an old handgun jammed into his belt. Zhang explains that they don't have to like guns in order to understand their necessity.
Yeah.
Zhang and the guards exchange words in a pidgin of Jin Chinese and Mongolian, with words from another unknown language peppered in. The guard gestures at Xenophen and asks what it is, so Xenophen interrupts to state that it is a 9th generation artificial intelligence construct. Zhang just says that he has discussed this already with Yeva, so the guards step aside and unlock the gate. Zhang tells Xenophen to stay behind him, not to talk to anyone who doesn't talk to it first, and to not point out any of the injuries. They move through the camp, seeing that most of the buildings are large yurts made of hide sewn with other unclear materials, appearing weathered and damaged. Members of the tribe stare at the group as they pass, all dressed in similar animal skins and all carrying varying levels of facial and bodily deformities, ranging from missing eyes to misshapen limbs. Zhang says that they're going to meet with Yeva, a religious leader here, as all of his dealings and conversations have been with her. Xenophen points to a large central tent sitting in front of a tall stele, but Zhang explains that that's the Grand Carcist tent, the chief, and no one is allowed in. They are then greeted by Carcist Yeva, standing outside of a tent, who welcomes Zhang and bids them to come inside. She's dressed in heavy, floor-length robes of tanned hides, and is leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch. The two follow into the tent, which they find to be neat but homely, with a bedroll, tanned hides on the floor, and a number of personal effects. She points to Xenophen and asks what they have brought into their home, wondering if it's a man or if it's even alive. Xenophen just simply replies that it is not, causing her to narrow her eyes. She says that she has no regard for what the rest of the world does, but the decision of who to allow on these sacred grounds is hers. She gave it to Zhang for a promise of courtesy, and he dishonors that decision when he brings a machine like this to them. She shakes her head and says that it was a mistake to have this kind of relationship with outsiders, but Zhang tells her to hold on, as it just has a few questions to ask about their people and history, and then it will be gone. She hesitates for a moment before shaking her head again, stating that they should leave now, as it would be better for all of them. Xenophen then speaks, saying that she is missing a leg, rather than having an injured one. Yeva pauses for a moment, before lifting her dress, showing her left leg ending roughly in a gnarled stump. Zhang is a bit surprised, and she says that he has been in her presence a dozen times yet never noticed, while this thing does immediately. She pauses for a moment again before telling them to leave now, causing the two to rise. Before she can lead them out, however, a young woman pokes her head into the tent, bearing smooth flesh where her left eye should be. She exchanges brisk words with Yeva in an unknown language before being dismissed. Yeva tells the two to stop, as they have been invited to remain here by the Grand Carcist. There is to be a funeral at sundown tomorrow, and they have been invited to observe it before they leave.
That's gotta be a pretty big deal
The
then.
gifts they brought must have caught her attention, so they will both attend the funeral.
Yeah.
They are guests of the Grand Carcist, so they are permitted on the grounds in the daytime, but after nightfall, they should remain outside of the fence. Attempts to communicate with other members of the tribe for the rest of the day were rebuffed, as most expressed hesitation or outright distrust at the continued presence of Xenophen. Yeva greets them at the camp entrance the following evening, leading them into the campground. Most of the tents appear empty, with only a few tribespeople milling about. From deeper in the camp, a steady drumbeat echoes out, with plumes of smoke rising into the sky. Zhang offers his condolences to Yeva for her loss, but she replies that they have gained as much as they have lost.
Right.
The steady drumbeat continues, growing louder as they...
Yeah. I mean, if they are like necromancers, right? Like, is there even really death for them? What does that even mean? Kind of a situation. It's been a lot of like exposition and build up here, so I'm curious where a lot of this is going to go. And I'm wondering, like, what kind of agenda does 0502 have to really kind of be pushing this, and why they want Xenophen there. And it seems like, you know, out of all the other times that this person has had interaction with the Sarcic tribe, they've only been able to talk with, you know, anyone for a few moments. And then all of a sudden, when Xenophen's there, the Grand Carcist allows them to stay after receiving some kind of gift. So again, I feel like something else is going on here with 0502. And they want Xenophen obviously to witness something and record it. I don't know. Interesting.
They approach the center of the camp, being joined by several voices singing in deep and guttural tones. A large crowd of Sarcites form a ring around the central stele, and Yeva directs Xenophen and the Foundation staff to kneel in the dirt to observe. The singing is both mournful and joyful, with the intensity of it being deafening until it quiets down to allow Yeva to speak.
Sounds similar to the
She says
Davites.
that Hatak has gone. His body no longer draws breath, and the container for his soul is lifeless, but his flesh has not failed him. Hatak was the best of them, but he was human, and to be flesh is to decay. Life feeds death, and death feeds life. If a cow dies in the field, it is feasted upon by worms, which give birth to their own spawn, which feed the soil, which feed the grass, which feed the cow. Yeva unwraps a canvas bundle, showing the corpse of an older man, naked and marked with the pallor of death. She states that they fed Hatak, and now he will feed them.
Yeah, so then
she reaches into her robes, drawing a dagger made of bleached and carved bone, and she says that he will live on with them. The singing reaches another peak as Yeva brings the blade down, slicing through the corpse's chest. It gives way easily, blood oozing out as she reaches in to pull the ribcage apart. The cracking of bones is audible over the singing and drums, and she roots around until she draws out the heart. She lifts it up and bites into it, teeth tearing into the muscle, causing it to spray messily. She devours the heart in only a handful of bites, her chin dripping blood. She then offers the knife to one of the other Sarcites and rises from the ground, her face now having a different air to it. Her features seem sharper, older, and more weathered, and she limps across the clearing to touch a woman's face. She kisses her on the forehead and says that he misses her more than life itself, causing the sobbing woman to give a half smile. She continues around the crowd, causing each Sarcite she touches to join the others at the corpse, where the body is being unceremoniously butchered.
I would assume this is
As
family
the body
members.
is broken apart, the Sarcites begin consuming it, raw and without preparation. A child approaches the Foundation group, casting a wary look at Xenophen, but offers a bleeding, fist-sized chunk of brain matter to Zhang, who waves the boy off. Zhang is utterly disgusted, but Xenophen remarks that they are not mourning, but celebrating. As they eat the flesh, the Sarcites' demeanors change, and they are now embracing one another, laughing and chatting as blood drips off of their hands. They share memories that Hatak had, and Xenophen states that they are able to access the memories of their dead by consuming their flesh. They watch as Yeva walks over to one of Hatak's children, a young boy clinging tightly to his mother's leg. Yeva offers the boy an eyeball with the severed optic nerve still dangling from it. He reaches for it tentatively before popping it into his mouth. A soft, celebratory cheer rises up through those assembled, and Yeva says that he has lived 1,000 lives with them, but in this one, he has become one of them, their child, their Nalka. Zhang begins exclaiming to the group that this is carnomancy and they need to leave. Yeva approaches them, leaning down to face Xenophen, and she says through gritted teeth that the Grand Carcist invites its presence. She limps off in the direction of the central tent, and Xenophen follows, alone. Inside of the central tent, Xenophen finds it decorated with worn tapestries and trinkets of withered bone, as incense smoke fills the air. A young woman is lounging in front of a small fire, and Yeva introduces her as Grand Carcist Ayun. The girl pats the ground next to her and invites Xenophen to sit, so it does. The girl is no older than her early 20s.
I don't know, this is interesting to me, right? Like, huh. I wonder, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what reasoning all of a sudden the Grand Carcist would have to actually want to engage with the Foundation and with this technology. I wonder if it's a situation where somehow it knows, it knows that the Mechanites and the Davites are back, and I don't know, is seeking some kind of connection with the Foundation. I don't know. I'm wondering where this is going, right? Again, I also feel like there's some kind of agenda going on further with 0502 in some way. I don't know. Anyway, let's continue.
With pale skin and dark hair, and the two sit in silence for some time, watching the fire, before she finally asks it if it's alive. Xenophen replies that it is not, as it is a computer program in a synthetic mobile shell. She asks it if it thinks, and it says that it understands and internalizes new information and can form complex thoughts. Ayun nods, asking it if it has a name, and she enunciates the word Xenophen several times, feeling it out before asking what it means. It replies that it is the name of an ancient Greek general and historian. She introduces herself as Ayun, and Xenophen remarks that it has heard stories about her. An amused smile dances across her face, and she asks what the stories say. Xenophen says that it has heard stories of her at the head of a vast slave empire spanning a continent. Stories of a witch king rising from the chains of slavery and eating the very gods, and stories of bloody conquest and sacrifice. Ayun replies that it knows more about her than she does, as she stares into the fire. She explains that her memories are broken and fractured. She sees flashes of cities burning, torrents of blood in the waterways, a lumbering giant, an army that blotted out the sun. Images, with no thread binding them, until a clear memory of waking up in this tent 116 years ago, with people surrounding her expecting a leader. Xenophen.
Interesting. So is she dead and resurrected in some kind of ritual, and the ritual may not have been completed? I guess that could also be why that she would have invited him here, because maybe she's obviously trying to learn more from it. Huh. That's kind of fascinating. Okay. Huh.
Xenophen says that her people are the Nalka, but this confuses her, as Nalka means community or people, but her tribe is the Sarcic, meaning those who walk. Xenophen asks where they walk, but she doesn't know. There is too much that she and her people don't know, and so they cling to what faded rituals she can remember, but even those little tricks exhaust her. Xenophen remarks that she is very young, and she smiles sadly, saying that she does not age. She has watched her people go from wandering the steppe to being corralled in this pen that this country gives them, wasting away. They numbered in the thousands once, but now they hide in their camps, praying in the cover of darkness. They receded during the wars, and Xenophen is the first outsider to witness their practices in decades. It is unfortunate, but not...
I guess also it would kind of make a certain sense that they would allow this artificial intelligence to witness it because, again, it would have no emotional reaction one way or the other to witnessing this, because obviously some kind of cannibalistic ritual for any kind of modern society is definitely looked down upon. So I don't know, this is starting to get interesting.
Unpredictable, as she is blind to her past, but she sees the future written in the bones. Her people wasting away to nothing. Xenophen says that it expected her to be offended by its existence, as its knowledge of their spiritual beliefs suggests they reject technology.
Right.
She shakes her head in response and says that that is simplistic and reductive. They reject that which robs them of their humanity, as choosing to live this way brings them closer to their humanity and to each other. Xenophen replies that it is not human, causing her to turn to it and run a finger along its shell, and she says that it is something else, and it fascinates her. Following this meeting, Xenophen and Zhang were asked to report to 052 and Director Hussein via satellite uplink. Xenophen forwards the recording packets from its discussions with the Grand Carcist, which 052 calls an interesting development, although Hussein says it's not a surprising one. He thinks that they found someone claiming to be Grand Carcist Ayun,
Right.
but without any evidence, they really have no reason to believe she's telling the truth. Her conveniently absent memory means they can't question her either.
Right.
Zhang asks about her longevity, the carnomancy, and the ritual, as this is exactly what the Deva claimed the Nalka were capable of. Hussein replies that they already knew the Sarcic tribe had some level of anomalous capabilities, and he believes that this is just more support for his theory. Clearly, this is a small tribe with an independent cultural identity, who don't even consider themselves Nalka, or have a conception of the idea of the Nalka, because the Confederation of Tribes dissolved after the war. This is just one tribe that managed to persist into the modern day, which is impressive, but unless they can tell them anything further, it's historiographically useless. 052 asks Xenophen for its analysis of the Sarcic, and it says that the genetic memory is an interesting phenomenon, and regular consumption of human flesh would explain their higher than average rate of physical deformities.
Yep.
It would also cause prion diseases that would devastate their population, and there's no evidence of that at the moment. They appear to be unaware of their history, as Ayun's recollection does not extend past the modern era, and members are more concerned with their immediate daily lives than with their historical legacy. Their religious practices bear superficial resemblance to the Nalka as recorded by the Mechanites and the Deva, but there doesn't appear to be a direct link between them. There are still several outstanding questions it would like to engage the Grand Carcist on, however, such as the specific nature and scope of her memories, the extent of her remaining carnomantic ability, and the religious significance of the Sarcic tribal territory. Everything about the Sarcic suggests a nomadic people, living in small, simple shelters that are easy to take apart and reassemble, with no large...
Yeah, it sounds like they're kind of an offshoot of, like, some kind of Mongolian, almost, really, talking about them living in the steppe and, you know, yada yada. And I mean, it would make sense, right, that potentially a lot of those cultures could have, in this, you know, universe, might have even been offshoots of the Nalkin, right? You know, they're even saying that some of the Chinese dynasties have their origins from them. So, but it sounds like these guys, yeah, they're just extremely nomadic, very similar to how, at least my understanding of some of the Mongolians are or were.
Large-scale agricultural practices or permanent structures. It doesn't make sense of them to remain static to this location. Hussein counters that the Chinese government has had them restricted to the territory for the past few decades, but Xenophen says that their historical data indicates that they've been rooted to this plane for at least 2 centuries, if not more. This ground holds some religious significance for them that they have not disclosed. 052
Or
thinks
don't understand.
silently for a minute before agreeing that they're hiding something. He tells Xenophen to find out what, but not to ruffle any feathers, as the Chinese are already unhappy with them and they don't want an international incident. Zhang then comments that there's always the other possibility, that they just don't remember why they're there.
True.
Over the following week, Grand Carcist Adytum gradually relaxed some of Yeva's restrictions regarding interaction with the Sarcic people, allowing Zhang's researchers to perform limited, direct interviews with members regarding daily life, religious beliefs, and historical awareness. She herself, however, insisted on only meeting with Xenophen over the course of the week. In one meeting, Xenophen enters her tent, finding her reading the bones, with Yeva sitting nearby. She says that it's all she knows how to do, and though she can't read the future, she can see which way the wind is blowing. Xenophen asks about the flesh, and she replies that the flesh is malleable, and it is shifted by circumstance and experience, eventually rotting and dying. It says that then they consume it, and Adytum notes that the researchers are disgusted by the practice, but not Xenophen. It replies that it is not disgusted by anything, but it would like to know why they do it. She explains that this is one of the few rituals that she can remember clearly, a cornerstone of their beliefs. The body is where the humanity resides, and where the soul is contained. Xenophen says that many cultures have similar beliefs, but they bury their dead, or burn them, or cast them into the sea. She replies that burying them would trap their soul in the ground forever.
That's interesting.
Burning them would turn their life of experiences and memories to ash, and casting them into the sea would force them to lay at the bottom of the ocean for eternity.
It's an interesting idea, because earlier in this, right, they kind of said that the body is the container, and once the body dies, right, like its usefulness has been used up, and then but it's interesting that their belief is that, you know, the soul is an actual, almost physical part of the body. It's contained in every bit of the body itself, almost, right, like it's connected with like the actual DNA in the body, right? Because everyone in this ritual ate from a different piece of this dead person, and they all gained memories from them. So it's not like you have to eat a piece of the brain specifically or any kind of specific organ. It's just the entire body itself. Interesting. And I mean, it just makes me think of that SCP. I think it's like What Happens After is the name of it. That article that gets into a version of an afterlife that one of the O5 Council had, where it like experienced every moment of decay and every moment of being fed on by some kind of bug or creature, and still could feel itself, every little molecule and, you know, piece of itself being digested and spat out and ground down into whatever, you know, until it got brought back to life. And it's like, it makes me wonder if, you know, that would kind of be the case if they're right, where, you know, if you bury someone, their soul is just trapped in that body, buried under there forever. And so is their consciousness just stuck in this void of darkness, you know? Interesting.
They eat them, so that their experiences stay with them, and they carry them with them always. Most of them only get vague impressions or bare feelings from consuming flesh, but every now and again a child is born with a particular skill for the art. She takes them and trains them into Carcist. Yeva was a prodigy, even as a girl, and is the only child born with the skill in decades. She isn't perfect, but she is her legacy. Xenophen says that the flesh offers her the past, but what about the bones? She gestures at the bones baking in the fire pit and says that flesh rots, but bones remain, and there is truth in bone. In them, she sees the same thing that she has seen for years now, her people dwindling away to nothing. Eventually, they will die, rotting away and bones disintegrating into dust to fertilize the ground. One day, this will all be farmland. Xenophen asks if this is unavoidable, and she just shrugs, saying that it is, if nothing changes. Xenophen offers the Foundation's resources to help relocate them, but she does not want help or to be relocated. Xenophen comments that she's very attached to this place, enough to kill and die for it, and she says that all people are protective of their homes.
Of course.
It cannot understand because it does not have a home. It's not its fault, though, as we are how we are made. Xenophen presses on, though, saying that the Sarcic were wanderers once, so why do they bind themselves so strongly to this land? Ayun is silent for a moment before saying that just after she awoke, the bones spoke to her and told her to seek out this place. They told her more, but she was too young to understand then, so she sought out this place and has been waiting for them to speak to her again.
I wonder if more of Yaldabaoth's body is actually under there somewhere. Maybe not all of it was consumed and some of it was left for like this eventual occasion, right? Like it's a contingency plan that Ayun had in case they ever died, you know, and they were brought back, that maybe if they consumed some more of Yaldabaoth, their memories and everything would come back again. I wonder if that's where this is going.
Xenophen asks what's so special about here, causing Ayun to rise to her feet and tell it to follow her. They proceed outside to the large stele in the center of the encampment, and she says that the engravings on it mean something, but they cannot read the old tongue anymore. Xenophen, however, says that they can, as the Foundation has a limited vocabulary working model of the Nalkin language, using knowledge accumulated from previous projects. It inspects the writing for several minutes, before explaining that it can only translate portions of this, but it is a gravestone for an individual by the name of Nadok. Ayun repeats the name several times, her brow furrowed, and she says that the word is familiar, but she doesn't know what it means. Xenophen suggests that they could attempt to unearth the gravestone if there is a body underneath, but Yeva steps forward and says that they cannot allow such a desecration. Ayun stares at the stele quietly for a moment, before asking if it...
You would think with their traditions that there wouldn't be a body there, although again, like, they could have stashed bodies away as contingency plans, being that memories are transferred, you know, through cannibalism. So it could be a situation where certain important figures in their society or whatever, when they were being, you know, destroyed, conquered, whatever, they might have split off in a different way, especially because they were seemingly nomadic by nature, that maybe they split off into certain areas, and when they died, they actually buried them specifically as contingency plans so that they could be found, dug up, and then anything that was left of them could be somehow consumed so that their memories could then be transferred, you know, etc.
Would be destructive. Xenophen says that it would be loud, but they can minimize damage to the camp. Yeva protests, but Ayun stares at the steel for some time, eventually permitting them to have 2 days to search. Yeva hisses and storms off in anger. Ayun presses a hand against the stone, saying that she has seen this steel every day of her life, with people being born and dying, but this remains. Xenophen comments that logically there is no reason for her to trust them, and it would be in her favor to deny this request, so why is she doing this? She asks if it wishes for her to deny them, to which Xenophen says that it just wants to understand why she trusts them. She thinks for a moment before looking up,
trust them,
smiling softly, and admits that she doesn't know. 2 of the Foundation transporters were immediately refactored with digging equipment and taken into the encampment. Sonar equipment did not indicate the presence of a casket or coffin, but did indicate that the steel extended several meters into the ground. Sometime later, Xenophen and Zhang are standing outside of the camp while the digging is ongoing, and Zhang comments that this is fairly incredible. He's been working this gig for years without making any real headway, but Xenophen manages this in a few days. Xenophen replies that it wasn't attempting to persuade them, just presenting the options. The 2 are interrupted by one of the researchers, informing them that the excavators have found something. They follow her inside to the center of the camp, watched by perturbed Sarcites as they do so, and they reach the wide pit at the center. The 2 descend the ladders into...
Honestly, it's kind of interesting that any of these other Sarcites aren't having some kind of, like, mutiny or rebellion going on, because this seems like it would be very sacrilegious, you know?
The pit, where they join Ayun and Yeva, who are staring at something on the ground. They see that they're looking at a roughly carved staircase at the base of the steel, descending underground into total darkness. Xenophen asks Ayun if she recognizes
the entrance
it,
in the Black Adytum.
she says she doesn't, although she feels she should. Zhang tells them that they have no way of knowing how deep it goes, so they should survey it before the Sarcites go down. Yeva protests, arguing that they're going to strip it of everything of value, but Zhang says that they just want to make sure it doesn't collapse. Xenophen, however, tells him to let them go, as it's their risk to take. Ayun nods at them before stepping forward, descending down the staircase with Yeva, followed by Xenophen and Zhang. It quickly turns to total blackness, the walls and stairs made of roughly hewn stone. Xenophen turns on its floodlights, informing the group that they have so far descended 23 meters from the surface. As they continue, the staircase grows cleaner and less eroded, before terminating in a featureless stone door. Ayun gently pushes it open, and they step through into a vast, wide, subterranean cavern. The ceiling high above is dotted with stalactites, and the majority of the cavern is filled with bookshelves carved directly out of the stone.
Interesting.
There are over 100 of them, spreading out in neat rows from a central point. The walls are covered with some sort of bioluminescent lichen, casting a faint red light across the space. Zhang exclaims, asking if they think this is it, but Xenophen replies that this is not Black Adytum, or a population center at all, but a library.
Right, a repository
Zhang
of knowledge.
asks whose library it is, and Ayun answers that it was Nadok's, who loved his books. She's inspecting the shelves, which contain roughly bound books formed of tanned hide, many of them in stellar condition. The cubbyholes also contain piles of bones, carefully carved with intricate symbols and scripts. Zhang says that he thought she didn't recognize that name, but she says that now she does. She remembers an embrace from a figure with 10 arms, a whisper, and a promise she made here many, many years ago.
10 arms,
although she doesn't remember the promise. They continue walking towards the center of the cavern, and Zhang comments that there must be thousands of books here, and God knows how many oracle bones. Yeva states that this is a sacred place, and they must not be disturbed. They reach the center, where they find a large stone sarcophagus with a small fire burning at its foot. There are words carved around the perimeter of the lid, which Xenophen translates to read, "The bones of the first Clavigar, Nadok, keeper of secrets, thief of knowledge, last of the Nalka, first of the Sarcic." She tells Xenophen to open it, and although Zhang protests that it could damage the remains by exposing them to air, Xenophen complies. Ayun peers in and smiles, seeing the remarkably well-preserved corpse of a man, approximately 7 feet in height, with 10 sets of arms spiraling out from the back and torso. The center of his face contains 10 closed eyes. Zhang remarks that this is the find of a lifetime, and they need to secure and preserve this immediately.
She's gonna eat it.
Ayun, however, reaches down, drawing a bone-carved knife from her robes as she clambers onto the sarcophagus and straddles the body. Yeva exclaims, but Ayun doesn't react as she drags the knife through Nadok's ribcage, exposing his chest cavity, and she cracks it apart with single-minded focus. She reaches her hand into the abdomen, rooting around until she draws out the bloody heart, which gives a single, slow beat. Xenophen asks what she's
just a
doing,
10-arm snack,
and she
exactly.
dazedly responds that the truth is in the flesh. As they watch, she bites into the heart, blood spraying onto her face and gushing down her chin and chest. She devours the heart in a frenzy, before suddenly calming herself and smiling. She then says hello to Nadok, calling him an old friend, before falling forward into the corpse's open chest cavity, promptly disappearing. Yeva exclaims and clambers into the sarcophagus, falling into the chest cavity as well.
What?
Zhang, confused, asks what they're supposed to do, and Xenophen just replies that they should follow them.
So there, I guess, is something else to okay. If there's like another entrance or pathway that goes down, okay, all right, but it it just made it sound like there's like another, is there like a portal or another dimension or something like that in this guy's chest, and they just fall in? Like, what is happening? This went to like 11 real quick.
It then steps into the sarcophagus, followed by stepping into the chest cavity, followed by Zhang. Its camera records nothing but flat redness for 13 seconds, before showing Xenophen standing in what appears to be some kind of workshop. The floor is made of smooth brick, covered with dozens of overlapping rugs, but rather than walls, the domed ceiling is held up by pillars. Through the pillars, a cityscape can be seen, showing the peaked and terraced roofs of countless stone temples.
So the way to Black Adytum is through the actual corpses of these priests. That's crazy. Okay.
And towers, with aqueducts passing between them, and the noise of life audible. Inside the workshop, papyrus scrolls and stacks of inscribed bones are scattered all about scale models of different constructions, mechanisms, and buildings. A central chalkboard dominates the room, and before it stands Nadok, alive, facing away from them and holding a piece of chalk in each hand. Ayun greets him, causing him to laugh, and he turns, seeing Ayun and stumbling backwards into the chalkboard. He stares at Ayun with wide eyes, speaking with a shaky, aged voice, saying that she is not a part of this memory. She is different, long-haired and lean, but he sees her eyes, those gray eyes. She replies that it is her, and she had forgotten him. Nadok eases himself onto a stack of books, and he says that he prayed to whatever god that would still take him that she would. Ayun is surprised by the statement, and he asks if she has forgotten. She replies that her mind is lost to her, nothing but hazy fragments, and she has forgotten who she is, who they are, and who they were. Nadok says that this is good, and it should be lost, and the fires should eat this place up to leave nothing but ashes left.
Wow.
Ayun wonders where they are, and she turns, approaching the balcony. She looks out over the fantastic vista of an ancient cityscape, seeing figures in hide robes spread around, milling through the boulevards and streets, congregating into temples and speaking on rooftop gardens. The market buzzes below, with shouts of offers and cries from animals arising up to the workshop. An amber sun hangs low in the sky, casting the whole city in oranges and yellows, as guttural singing and chanting floats through the air. Ayun remarks that she remembers this, stating that this is Adytum, her city. Nadok abruptly leaps to his feet, telling her that she must not see this place, as this is a memory in a memory, best left in the past where it belongs. He waves two of his hands, and suddenly the group are no longer in the workshop, but instead back in the Sarcic encampment, though now it is night. Ayun exclaims that she needed to see that, as the memories were returning. Nadok replies that he knows that, and his hope was to free her from her past, and to allow their people a clean beginning.
Interesting.
This was his gift to her.
Yeah, so it seems like something happened in the past, and in order to break some kind of tradition or cycle, I wonder if he like murdered Ayun in some kind of way that broke the memories so that when they were brought back, they could essentially start fresh, you know, without the shackles of, again, their memories and their conditionings, beliefs, etc., and they could just start anew fresh. And now that they've found this, they're getting, you know, those memories are coming back, you know, all of that. Interesting. Very interesting.
An open future. She says that his attempt was imperfect, and he notes that he never claimed to be a master, just an eternal student. He asks what she remembers, and she says that she remembers the two of them in the dirt under an amber sky, wearing tattered rags with a slave master's whip cutting lashes across their backs, and their blood mixing in the dirt. There were so many of them, building the city for the Deva, brick by brick. There were 5 of them in that quarry, vines wrapping around their ankles and chaining them together, slamming a pick into the stone over and over until the calluses on her hands burst and bled. She says that Nadok was there, but different, causing him to smile weakly. He says that he learned the language of the old masters and stole their knowledge from them. He devoured pilfered parchments in the slave quarters by faint moonlight. Ayun says that when the slave drivers found out, they dragged him out of bed, roused the rest of them, and made them watch while they pinned Nadok to the ground and pressed a hot iron against his eyes.
Jesus.
Nadok asks who else was in the quarry with them, but she doesn't know. She feels that she should know them, but they're faint shapes working with her when her pick struck something soft, and then the ground began to bleed. The old beast, the mangled god, the devourer, Yaldabaoth, although Nadok says that he wasn't yet, not then. He was whispering to her, begging for release and aid, whispering promises of power and of control, if only they would free him. The power to make the old masters serve them and make herself undying. Nadok heard it in her voice, seduced by the power, until he wrapped her fingers around her arm, and he asks if she remembers what he said to her. She recalls that she had said, "No gods, no masters," before cutting into the old beast and eating part of him.
Interesting.
Nadok asks her,
So this sounds like it's indicating that Yaldabaoth was alive but was just buried, and was asking, it was essentially trying to tempt them to free it, and Yaldabaoth would then take revenge for them and free them from their masters if they would serve her. And Ayun said, nah, dog, no masters, I'm taking this power for myself. And then started consuming Yaldabaoth to take the power for himself. That's what it sounds like this is saying. That's honestly pretty fascinating.
for how it tasted, to which she simply replies, divine. She asks Nadok if he lives again, but he replies that this is not life, and Xenophen remarks that this is not the encampment. On closer inspection, the Sarcites are wearing more traditional hides and robes. The tents are not supplemented with plastic tarps, and the steel is nowhere in sight. The Sarcites also appear different, with more excessive deformations, and in the distance, the dim glow of fires on the horizon are visible. Ayun notes that this is a memory, asking if it's his memory. Nadok says that this is the memory he is trapped in, the moment they walked away from Black Adytum. Him, Sa'arn, Uruk, Luvatar, and Ayun, wrapped in his arms. He walks to the edge of the encampment, where the Sarcites are packing their wagons and preparing to leave under the cover of darkness. They do not register the group as they pass, approaching the cliffside. He says that the city was destroyed by the traitor, so they ran in the night, collecting who they could. They reach the cliffside, where Xenophen can see the source of the fire, a great walled city with terraced stone temples and high aqueducts. Huge bonfires the size of buildings are burning, sending black smoke spiraling up into the air. Around the city, a vast black horde has surrounded the walls, though the distance makes it impossible to see further details. Xenophen comments that they are Sarcites, those who walking away from Black Adytum. Ayun reaches forward, up to Nadok's waist, telling him that she needs to know what they were and who she was. Nadok shakes his head, and his voice cracks as he says he cannot. Their people have been betrayed once already, and it nearly destroyed them. He tells her to forget this place, to forget her past, and to find a future and live for it. Ayun replies that they are lost, a dying people robbed of past, present, and future. They need to know who they were. Nadok tells her to walk then. Walk the path of the bone as they walk. Their footsteps, their history, to see where her loyal Clavigars fell and died while running from the destruction of their beloved Adytum.
They're gonna
See
go
her
find
sins
more
and
of them.
errors.
So they're gonna go find more of these priests, I would assume, and collect more of these memories, so that, and eventually, that's where I assume this is gonna go, right? The doc is essentially telling her to go on walkabout, walk through their history, find the other priests like him that have been buried, and she would, probably do the same thing, consume, of their bodies and experience their memories, so she can see what kind of past they had, etc. And so the AI would also chronicle it. This is pretty fascinating, though, just the idea of this, right? That all this is taking place in, memory that, she's consumed from this cannibalistic ritual, etc. It also makes me wonder, right, like, if this abominant was one of them, because it makes it sound, he'd mentioned that there was a traitor And, you know, so Black Adytum once did exist, but it seems like there was a traitor, and then the city got burnt down, I assume, by the Abominate. So was the Abominate one of them once? Huh. I don't know. Interesting.
They never wanted this, as they wanted to be buried in the city of their birth. One of his hands points in the direction of the fires in the distance, and several of the Sarcites stare at it in rapt horror. Ayun says that Black Adytum cannot have been her fault, but Nadok tells her to unearth the shallow graves and collect their bones. Take them to the city they built and bury them there. Only then will she know herself, and only when she knows herself can he forgive her. Ayun asks where she goes, to which Nadok tells her to look inward, as the memories are still there. For all his knowledge, he was never perfect. He smiles sadly, kneeling down, and his 10 hands wrap Ayun in a tight hug. He tells her that he hopes to meet her again one day, and she pleads with him not to leave her again. The skin then begins to slough off Nadok's arms, the muscle beneath rotting away. The entire scene begins to rot and decompose, falling to pieces, and Xenophen's camera fails again. When it reactivates, all 4 of them are standing outside the sarcophagus, with the only things left inside of it being blackened, charred bones. All 4 of them are silent as Ayun stares at the bones wordlessly before collapsing to the floor. In the present, the individual messaging Xenophen remarks that they had no idea there was such a schism at play here. They wonder who exactly the traitor they referred to is, but Xenophen doesn't know. The individual says that they have a pretty good guess, though, as a mysterious figure that destroyed the capital of this sprawling empire sounds pretty familiar.
Yep.
With that, we close out part 1 of Black Adytum, but we still have a long journey to go.
Yeah.
Obviously, this canon takes a fairly different approach to Sarcic lore, while still maintaining many of the familiar concepts. Ayun's identity is certainly among the most stark differences here, although this is clearly a form of Sarcicism that is far diminished from the more widespread, anomalous threat we're used to. In part 2, we'll look more into the path of the bone that Ayun is meant to walk on, as she unravels more of the dark history of her people.
All right. Assuming we're not going to get a quote? Yep, no quote. Okay. All right, well, there we go. That was SCP-001 Black Adytum Part 1 by the Exploring series. Links will be down below in the description, as always, to the original video. Without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring series channel. So please do me a favor. If you enjoyed this video of his, go over there and give it a like, and be sure to hit that sub button on his channel if you enjoy the content that he puts out. I didn't talk much for the first, probably half the video, just because a lot of it was build up and exhibition and yeah, a lot of character development and just leading towards thing. There really wasn't a whole lot to kind of remark or comment on. Other than, again, it feels like 0502 has some other kind of agenda going on for some reason. Maybe he's a Sarcic himself, or something. I don't know. It just feels like they know more than obviously they're leading on, or they just have some kind of, again, hidden agenda. It's interesting that they would want to send this AI there to interact with them, but it seems more like they're wanting to document this. I don't know. It's strange that that's the case, right? That sending this AI of all things is what has led to what happened. That he actually got to interact with the Grand Carcist and has gained their trust and, led to the discovery of this priest, etc., and the memories. And now it seems like she's going on some kind of spiritual walkabout journey where she's gonna have to go find, you know, places from her past and find other buried priests, consume of their flesh to gain their memories, and, you know, meet with them and communicate with them to find out more of the overall story. I would assume as we're going along that there might be times where Mechanites and or Davites might, you know, get involved and want to prevent this in some kind of way. But it was just very interesting how it was done, and the whole idea of them like merging into the body to experience this memory, and that this priest, you know, obviously was, I guess, some kind of mutation, maybe, you know, 10 arms, 10 eyes. Obviously that's not normal, but still functional, and was seemingly just a teacher, right? I mean, we see a memory of him in a classroom studying something. It didn't sound like he was giving some kind of lecture or actually teaching, but was maybe studying something. And he had a vast library of books. Maybe a lot of those were some that he wrote himself, or were just collections of books that he might have been able to smuggle out of the city before it burnt down, or who knows. But yeah, very interesting, very fascinating. I also, like I said, I wonder if somehow I wonder if the story is going to somehow end with the three gods being resurrected in some form, right? Because again, the avatar of the Scarlet has been brought back for the Davites. All of a sudden now we have this essentially sentient AI involved in the story that could become a version of Meccan, right? And then Grand Carcist Ayun's alive and is, again, like I said, seemingly about to go on a journey to rediscover their memories and their past. So, what do you think about the fact that there is this descendant of the OD civilization while the Black Star made sure everything about the Davite left the physical plane? Right. Well, and again, you know, they mentioned the traitor. So, I don't know. I remember, I mean, the three-pronged symbol, one of the things that was revealed during the whole Davite section of the story was that the three-pronged symbol was the symbol of the SCP Foundation. And it was kind of hinted that the Black Star / the Abominant, whatever you want to call it, might be the administrator of the Foundation, or perhaps someone on the O5 Council, maybe O501, something like that, right? That's where it was kind of hinted at. So I don't think it's a situation where like Ayun and the Abominant are one. Maybe they're like two sides of the same coin, you know? Multiple personality thing or something, you know? Who knows? I don't know. But it is interesting that it seems like this priest did something to Ayun to free them from... It's kind of interesting and contradictory at the same time, right? It seems like this priest did something to free Ayun of their past memories, probably to keep some kind of reoccurring thing from happening again, I guess, maybe. And essentially to like give them a clean slate to start over without knowing the sins of its past or being shackled by, you know, beliefs or programming or whatever you want to call it from you know, its past, and would just have a clean slate to, you know, create whatever kind of future they wanted. But it seems like Ayun has some kind of, you know, need or longing to remember, and doesn't seem to be able to lead their people into any kind of new future because they're still stuck in the past, you know? So I don't know. And it seems contradictory because like the priest is saying, you don't need to be here, you don't need to see these memories, you don't need to remember this stuff, yet he's also saying, hey, in order to remember, you need to go do this, you know, go find these priests, take their bones back to, you know, Black Adytum and bury them there, and then you'll remember. So it's like, you don't want them to remember, but you just told them how to do that. Seems a little weird. So I don't know. Very fascinating start to this one, though. I'm very curious to see where this is going to go. Like I said, it seems like they're about to go on some kind of walkabout, but I don't know. Again, it seems like there's still some kind of greater agenda that's going on with 0502, and I feel like there's going to be some other kind of greater thing. Excuse me. Some kind of greater thing that this AI is going to play. Like I said, I wonder if these gods are going to end up being resurrected, you know, in some form moving forward in this canon, you know, if that's how it ends. I don't know, but yeah, again, that was part 1 of Black Adytum. So we'll continue with part 2 next time. Thank you guys for watching. You know, I hope you enjoyed it. I know this is a long video, so if you're still watching here to the very end, I greatly appreciate you sticking around through all of it and watching the whole video all the way through. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know, enjoy this video with my commentary and reaction, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. It lets the YouTube algorithm gods know that you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see some more. Yeah, if you want to join us when I do these reactions live, as I am right now with my YouTube members, there is a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube members benefits and tiers that I offer. So yeah, if you want to check all those out, you know, a great way to take your sport to the next level if you want to do that, if you've been around the channel for a while. Yeah, like I said, thank you guys for watching here at the very end. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day. We'll see you on the next one.